Hey, welcome back. My name's Lucy and I like to build things, and in my shop lately I've been working a lot on my miter station. So I had previously taken out the doors here to this kind of false sink area in my cabinetry and had all of these bins. And that was really a step up from just the doors that I previously had. And if you're a better person than me, that might be the perfect system for you if you're good about always putting things away. But what I found is that these ended up scattered all over my shop, so it wasn't the best system for me. I also was only using about 12 inches of the 22-inch space that I had available, and this is prime real estate in my shop. So I just took some scrap wood from a recent project that I was working on and came up with this plan. So the top drawer, I still have a ton of space. This is going to be any key marking out, measuring type things, 1, 2, 3 block spacers, shims, stuff like that. And then I took all the bins from the little containers that I had and I put them in these next couple of drawers. So these are all the screws. And here we have washers, nuts, biscuits, dowels, bolts, things like that. And then the larger, deeper ones, I have some dominoes in here and a bunch of just miscellaneous stuff. And then in the bottom one, I'm going to have some room for some tool storage. I have my domino in here. I am not just great, again, about taking a sustainer, opening it up and stuff. I like to be able to grab things and go a little bit quicker than that. So that's great. On the sides here, on both sides of this one, I have magnetic strips. So I have chisels over here and, just some random things. This side, I have different router templates that I use. And then on this side, I have blades for my miter saw as well as my small circular saw. Let me show you those. So here is those blades, and then again magnetic strips along this side. So I'm extremely excited about this. Like I said, I just used a bunch of different scrap wood, and I would like to show you how I did this. So my first step was to gather up all of the stuff that I wanted to store and to get a feel for just how many of the little yellow bins would fit on what size drawers. I didn't know if I wanted to use the whole width for drawers or if I wanted to add that vertical part. One thing that I really disliked about this project is that it felt a lot like plumbing, and I hate plumbing because, you're working in a low, tight space because this used to be a sink area. So I do apologize for all of the butt in the camera action that you're going to see in this video. So the next step is to obviously take apart what I already had there, and I'm going to save those two outside pieces of wood so that I can make a little cabinet since I already have the little slots at the right height, and then I can store things like extra coasters and stuff in some of these containers, and they just want to have the yellow bins in them. One thing I noticed once I got this taken apart was that I was dealing with a really large bubble, like at least a ½ an inch this bubbles up in the middle. These were used cabinets that I bought, and so this just kind of throughout the whole process I had to keep shimming things and making sure that I was keeping the parts that I was doing true and square. So I came up with a lot of different plans for how I wanted to do those two vertical parts, and what seemed to be the simplest was to just take a couple of 2x4s and run a ½ inch dado through them on for top and bottom, and one is going to be offset more than the other. One's going to be more center and the other one's more offset because I just need the blades on one side of it. So I wanted to keep that narrow so I had a lot of room for those router templates. So this was my solution. So I secured the top piece in place, and then for the bottom piece, I knew that I was going to have some trouble because of that bubble. So I purposely have my space too big because I know that I'm going to have to shim it so that I have a nice even track for my piece to ride on. After I got the shims cut down and the piece secured to the bottom, then I went ahead and applied paste wax to the top and the bottom track as well as to the piece that's going to slide in and out, and that makes for a really nice smooth ride. The 2x4s gave me a really nice solid surface to be able to screw into for the ½ inch birch that I'm going to use on both sides of this. Next, I cut down a whole bunch of wood for the drawers, and so the top 3 drawers are 2 3/4 inch deep, and the next 2 drawers are 4 3/4 inch deep. I'll do a separate video on these drawers because I made them just extremely simple. They're just shop drawers, and since most of the material was 1/2 inch, well, for all the sides it was 1/2 inch, and the bottom some were 1/2 inch, some were 3/8, depending on what I had left. I just glued and nailed these together, and they are plenty strong for what they need to do. I'm using 1¼ brad nails, and one of the main keys to be able to do this successfully without ending up with nails inside your drawer or blowing out the bottom is to make sure that you hold your nail gun perpendicular to the piece. If you run it parallel with the piece, the nails are more likely to bend side to side than they are top to bottom. So that's just a little tip to make sure that you don't end up blowing nails out the side. Remember when I said this was made from scrap wood? Well, I wasn't lying. As you can see, this lovely inside of this drawer is going to have some nice walnut accents. This was an oops board from a previous project. So because of that bubble, I couldn't really just use like a piece of wood or something in reference from the bottom because the bottom was really not stable and consistent. So I used the spacer that comes with this Rockler drawer slide jig and referenced it to the floor for both sides to get the first drawer in. Once the first drawer was in, then I could reference easily for the next drawers. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but even though I've done dozens of drawers like this, it doesn't matter how often I do this. When I put it in the first time and you hit that point where it feels like it's not going to go, I always have a moment of panic, but then just push it in hard, pull it out, and then they're good to go. I referenced straight off the drawer for the following drawers, and then when I was putting the side piece on the drawer box itself, I did a 1/2 inch spacer up, and this made for some really nice tight drawers. When I got to the top drawer side, there was no space to be able to use the Rockler jig, so I measured the distance between the previous gap because these 3 drawers are exactly the same height, and it was 1 1/8 inch, so I just found a piece of wood that was 1 1/8 inch, and I screwed it into place temporarily to act as a spacer for me, so I was able to just apply the hinge from there, and that worked out really well. Now this was meant to be a very quick weekend project, so I'm going to apply the drawer fronts in pretty much the easiest possible way as well. So I just cut out 1/2 inch birch, and I'm just going to nail it in from the front. And then when I put the handles in, that's going to apply a lot of pressure front to back. So there's going to be no stability issue here. And I just did 1/8 inch spacers. And since I'm going to use the Rust-Oleum paint that's pretty thick, you're not going to be able to see the nail holes or anything. For the side cabinets, I just ran a 1/2 inch dado, 1/4 inch through the 1/2 inch outside door to make a groove for the piece of wood. I put some glue in it, and then I just held it firmly in place and applied just a couple of brad nails, just enough to be able to hold it for me to be able to remove it. But I wanted it in place so that I could make sure I got it just right top to bottom. And then I put 2 little 45 brackets on each one just for a little bit of added security. So here I'm marking a center point in my drawer, and then I'm going to just use a square and follow that down so that even if the drawers are slightly out of alignment, the handles will be perfectly in alignment. And I just made a simple jig and put a center point on that I'm going to line up with the center point on the drawer itself. And I decided to pre-drill these before I painted it, and I'm really happy that I did because that way I didn't have to wait for the paint to make sure that it was fully cured before I clamped anything or held anything up to it. So making a jig when you have to do 7 of the same drawer handles is definitely worth the time. I'm using some leftover hammered black by Rust-Oleum, and I had this left over from a cargo trailer that I built, and this was the closest that I had that would match the countertops, so I thought that was a nice contrast to the off-white cabinets. Applying the handles was a snap since I had pre-drilled them. So one other thing that I decided to do was to make just a false drawer front for the top of this because as you can see it looks a little bit weird the way that it is. So I just took a piece of MDF and just painted it to match, and that really I feel like kind of finished the project. Quick tip when using the label maker, if you just press space in between and cut them yourself instead of using their spaces, this is the difference between how tight you can make them or how big. So save your money on your label tape. So once my cabinet was all done, I whipped up a little tiny cabinet out of those other pieces so that I could keep some of the empty containers and store stuff that I wanted in it. I hope this gave you a few ideas for your workshop, and if you are enjoying my work, please like and subscribe and follow along on all the crazy stuff that I decide to build. Have a great day and happy building!